From the mists of the north, Germanic tribes headed south, reaching as far as the borders of the Roman Empire. Barbarians, the Romans called them. But in 375 AD, the most feared of all warriors descended upon Europe, murdering and pillaging. The Huns triggered a great migration. Hundreds of thousands of Goths, Vandals, and Franks went in search of a new homeland. They sacked Rome. Some tribes disappeared almost without trace. Others left behind valuable treasures. The Germanic barbarians were to become the founders of Europe. It's the year 120 BC. Wild Germanic tribes from the far north moved slowly southwards. For 2 decades, they filled the Romans with dread. Tens of thousands of skulls are stored here in the Natural History Museum in Budapest. A tomb for many tribes: Visigoths and Ostrogoths, Marcomanni, Gepidae, and Vandals. The skull of a Cimbrian. What did he look like? After 2,000 years of rest, his face is about to be restored. Building from the skull, anthropologists can reconstruct a face from the past. Friend and foe alike would recognize him, would call him by his name. The Gauls cursed him as a robber. The Romans called him barbarian. Both were afraid of the Cimbrians. He is one of tens of thousands who made their mark in history. Where did he come from? Who was he? Were the Cimbrians merely dull-witted warriors? Were they heroic Wagnerian figures, or even members of an Aryan master race? Let's go back into the past with him. We know something of the Cimbrian kings and wars, but nothing of their lives, of their sufferings, hopes, and fate. And we know little of their 20-year trek through Europe. He was with them to the end. His home was high in the cold north. It's the year 121 BC. To the Romans, the Cimbrians were two-legged animals about whom there was nothing human apart from a voice and limbs. Creatures who lacked culture and civilization, naked, wild, unhoused. The Roman historian Tacitus wrote,
"Who would leave Italy for Germania, unless indeed it were his home?" The land has no attractions and a raw climate. It offers a bleak prospect to native and visitor alike. The Germans are the native inhabitants and are entirely untouched by immigration and the hospitable reception of foreign races.
To Romanize, the tribe they called the Cimbrians, lived at the edge of the inhabited world in Jutland. It's estimated that between 60,000 and 80,000 Germans, Cimbrians, Teutons and Ambrones were scattered across Denmark in hundreds of villages. What we know of the Cimbrians comes from what has been found in bogs, the burial grounds of ancient times. The bogs preserved the corpses until they were found by peat cutters. One of the bog bodies is world famous, the Winderby girl. She was just 14. She's holding a birch stick. Sticks pinned down her body in the bog. Were they afraid that she was one of the living dead, that she would return? Was she executed? For adultery, maybe? Or did she die a natural death and was laid to rest in the bog by her family? The causes of death of the bog people pose many riddles. But the bodies can tell scientists what clothes the Cimbrians wore. A cloak made from animal skin has been preserved, as has a finely woven headband which slipped over her eyes when she was buried. For over 2 millennia, the bog preserved the clothes, which must now be kept in air-conditioned storage. The museum at Schleswig has an entire collection of garments found in bogs. Textiles expert Inga Haig can deduce a great deal about the Cimbrians' clothes from the smallest fragments of fabric.
Ja, die Leute, die nicht so viel Besitz hatten, die sich nicht so viel leisten konnten, die mussten natürlich zusehen, dass die Gewänder hatten, die rund um das Jahr funktionierten. Die Leute konnten sehr gut weben, sehr schöne, dünne Garne spinnen, aus sehr guter, luftiger Wolle. Und es hat wahnsinnig schön gewärmt.
Despite their primitive looms, the Cimbrians knew how to weave fine fabrics with rich patterns. The Cimbrians did not go around in rags or sacks, says Inga Haig. They had a variety of clothes, even followed fashions. When these pieces of fabric were found, they had taken on the dark color of the peat. But they were not always like that.
Wir hatten mehrere Gräber, aber besonders an einen denke ich, wo alles sehr braun aussah. Und dann legte ich es unter diesem Mikroskop und guckte es an und pinselte die Oberfläche ab. Und plötzlich so strahlten alle Farben gegen mich. So etwas habe ich früher nie erlebt. Also das war rot und aprikot, gelb, grün, himmelsblau, lila und kreideweiß.
The yarns were dyed with everything nature had to offer: apples, blueberries, bark, roots, lichen and ferns, in every color of the rainbow. A final rinse in urine set the dyes, a method still in use. Wieland the blacksmith. Archaeological finds have shown that every Cimbrian settlement had its own smithy. The smith was a highly respected figure, a leader in technology. He smelted the iron himself. Every village had a furnace in which the smith heated raw iron ore that had collected in streams and bogs. His most important task was to forge weapons. Although the Cimbrians were buried without their weapons, they have been found in what are known as dead ice holes, small lakes that were the gateway to the world of the gods, to Odin, to Wotan. To win the gods' favour, the Cimbrians offered sacrifices of grain in clay pots and also valuable weapons. Fortunately for archaeologists, the lakes turned into bogs, which preserved the Cimbrians' offerings for thousands of years. Ceramics, simple and unadorned. The Cimbrians possessed only the bare essentials. A deer's bone fashioned into a flute. Shepherds probably roamed the poor heaths of Jutland with them. In one bog, a leather bag and its contents were preserved. Did a shaman use these pieces of wood and horn to foretell the future? Or was it just a craftsman's bag? The oldest weapons found in Denmark. The Romans could not have made better. This is what the Cimbrian settlement Borremose looked like. Each farmstead was fortified with a ditch, earth rampart and palisade. Archaeologists suspect that Borremose was the seat of a king. Around 180 Cimbrians, shepherds, farmers and warriors, were housed in more than 20 buildings. Archaeologists have reconstructed the Germanic longhouses, based on structures in the ground that have been preserved over millennia.
Ja, her har jeg et af de meget spændende fund, som blev fundet herude i voldgravene for over 60 år siden. Det er et stykke hasseltræ, en lige stammestykke, som er omhyggeligt delt op i mærker her. Mærker, som er hugget med økser og skåret med kniv. Det er nogle gamle mål, man har brugt hos bønder overalt i verden, når der er blevet målt land og tømmer, og måske også huse.
Bo Madsen took this ancient measuring stick back to where it was excavated in 1949. It's 1 meter 20 long, about 4 feet or 2 paces. From Borremose, the Cimbrians walked over 7,000 kilometers on their great trek south. But what made them decide to leave? The history books suggest a catastrophic flood. Or did cold and hunger drive them from their homeland? The never-ending winters and dismal weather oppress them. The soil feeds them meagerly, reported Seneca the Elder. The Cimbrians' lives were hard, their soil was poor. They had no tradition of stockpiling food, they lived from hand to mouth. Even in good years, they barely survived the winter. How did they ever manage in lean years, once their small supply of grain was exhausted? Can the bog bodies tell us something about the fate of the Cimbrians and explain what led to the great exodus from Denmark? Why did the Winderby girl live only 14 years if she died a natural death, as scientists believe? Pieces of her skeleton have been retrieved from under the leathery shell of her body. We now know what she looked like. A forensic scientist has reconstructed her face. But how 2,000 years later can her bones reveal something of her life and death? Using special X-ray equipment, the physicist Roland Anjol is scanning a shin bone. He is looking for so-called Harris lines, signs of retarded growth, malnutrition and starvation. His conclusion?
Was wir hier sehen, sind Zonen, die dichtere Knochensubstanz zeigen. Hier ist das Wachstum verzögert gewesen oder ist ganz zum Stillstand gekommen. Bei dem Mädchen von Windeby sehen wir 12 solcher Wachstumsverzögerungszonen.
So she starved for 12 of her 14 winters. In the north, everyone would have suffered like the Winderby girl. Hunger and deprivation winter after winter. How did they survive at all? In the stomach of one bog body, biologists found, in addition to oats and hazelnuts, the seeds of various weeds. Empty stomachs were filled with bird food like knot grass. Even English researchers found the Cimbrian gruel inedible when they recreated it. It was the last meal of the mysterious Tolland man. This plaited leather rope is 1.25 meters long. It ends in a noose around the neck of the Tolland man. Maiken Hansen knows this black leathery bogman from top to toe. Every scar, every bit of stubble on his fine face. Was he executed? Did he take his own life? Or was he even a human sacrifice? And how is it that he's still so well preserved after 2,000 years?
Han blev lagt i mosen straks efter han var død. Og han er formentlig lagt i mosen i vintersæsonen. Der er færrest bakterier i mosen i vintertiden, og hans meget fine tilstand antyder, at mosen har lukket sig over ham meget, meget hurtigt, efter han er blevet lagt ned.
In 1950, the Tolland man was found by peat cutters in Jutland. Since then, dozens of scientists have examined this, the most impressive of all the bog people. He died aged not even 40, shortly before the Cimbrians started their push southwards. Tacitus's account of the Germanic people's gruesome sacrificial customs seems to be accurate.
Vi ved ikke meget om den sidste dag i Tollandmandens liv. Han er formentlig blevet ofret til guderne, enten fordi man ville takke for en gunst, eller fordi man forventede en gunst af guderne.
First he was hanged, then buried in the bog. Forensic scientists observed that someone tenderly shut his eyes and mouth for his eternal sleep in the bog. The Tolland man was a human sacrifice, probably to Nertus, the goddess of fertility, to whom the Cimbrians prayed for good harvests. Bog bodies have led scientists to conclude that it wasn't a catastrophic flood, but hunger that drove the Cimbrians from Denmark. But the mood was not one of pure despair. From Roman traders who had traveled north to buy amber and animal hides, they had heard about the lure of the south. And their own scouts had traveled far, even as far as the Danube. They would have told their people about lands where furs weren't needed in winter, about lush meadows and fertile fields under the eternal sun, about sweet fruits and intoxicating drinks made from strange berries, about unimaginable wealth and luxury. In the north, there was little to hope for. Too many people were trying to scrape a living from the meager soil. If they migrated, the constant starvation might end. If they turned their backs on the Cimbrian Peninsula, they might have a future again. Did they vote on it? Did they draw lots? Who had to stay? Who could go? We have no way of knowing. No one knows the exact date. No one knows the exact circumstances. Nonetheless, it is a historical fact. Around 120 BC, the Cimbrians left their homeland forever and found their place in history. German scholars call this mass migration the Völkerwanderung, the wandering of the tribes. It was a journey into the unknown, a great adventure, full of danger. But no matter what lies in store, they would probably have said, it has to be better than death. The future belongs to the brave and the bold. They must have planned their exodus, discussed it with other tribes, and arranged to meet. The Roman historian Diodorus reported,
An enormous mass surged forwards. Hundreds of thousands of armed Cimbrians and Teutons were on the march. They had hordes of women and children with them. They were searching for a land that could feed such vast numbers.
Today, historians assume that about 100,000 people joined the Great Trek. The news of the approaching barbarians filled the Romans with dread. The Cimbrians, Teutons and Ambrones left Jutland and passed through regions settled by other Germanic tribes, Angles, Saxons and Swabians. Following the Elbe, their journey took them through Bohemia, always heading south. A migrating tribe moves forward laboriously on foot, day after day, month after month, in all weathers. When they could, they followed rivers, the ancient trade routes. These gave them a direction and a goal. But rivers could also be insurmountable obstacles, unless they could find a ford for the hazardous crossing. It could take days for the whole trek to cross a river. Only the leaders had horses. The few carts that transported the barbarians' belongings were drawn by an early species of oxen, slow but strong. The huge column of Cimbrians and Teutons stretched for 20 to 30 kilometers. They had fled from hunger, deprivation, and misery. But how did these people, who were farmers and shepherds, not nomads, feed themselves while they were on the move? To survive, these economic refugees often resorted to looting and pillaging, particularly when they chanced upon weaker opponents.
On account of their unbridled savagery, they were feared by all, because they knew only one law: might is right. They took by force that which was not given to them voluntarily. The Cimbrians acquired the reputation of being a tribe of wandering robbers. Soon, the word Cimbrian came to mean robber.
They slaughtered each other and took what they could get. One Germanic tribe fought another. Though some scholars regard the Cimbri as Celts or of Celtic origin. Origin and lineage, blood and race meant nothing to them. Opponents quickly became allies. Friend became foe. When hunger overwhelmed them, they stole from others. In antiquity, there was no notion of war crimes. Plundering, robbery, enslavement, and pillaging were not looked down upon. Everybody did it. And like the Romans, the Cimbrians stopped at nothing. The Roman historian Tacitus wrote,
They regard it as stupid and spiritless to acquire with their sweat what they can gain by blood.
During the winter months, the trek rested. It was hard to find suitable shelter. Even a cave seemed like a palace. With the superiority of their civilization, the Romans regarded the Cimbrians as aggressive, drunk, unkempt savages. They called them barbarians, a word supposedly imitating the stuttering sound of their speech, which the Romans didn't understand. They thought that the Cimbrians were uncivilized, stinking, and dirty. A dismissive view, for which they later paid. Naturally, life on the road made it difficult to attend to personal hygiene. But the simple stereotype was wrong. Archaeological finds from the bog show that the Cimbrians carried personal sponge bags. This is the toiletry bag every man hung from his belt. There were wooden toothpicks, scissors for cutting hair, and a knife for a smooth shave. On a ring, there was a pair of tweezers for nose hair, and even a tiny spatula for cleaning the ears, as well as the obligatory comb for sophisticated hairstyles. The Swabian knot of the Osterby man.
They comb their unruly hair and knot it artistically, but they don't want to be admired. This grooming is for the eye of the enemy. They want to appear huge and terrible.
To the Romans, the Germans were uncouth and terrifying. But what did they really look like? Like heroes from Wagnerian operas? Prototypes from an Aryan racial handbook? The Hungarian anthropologist Agnes Kusta is reconstructing the face of a skull which was found in Saxony. Here, we will be able to see how a Germanic tribesman's face is restored 1,500 years after his death. This biometric procedure was developed by forensic scientists to identify dead bodies. Now, Agnes Kusta applies her knowledge of anatomy to the skull. She sculpts the muscles and then works out what the nose and the ears looked like.
Amit nem tudunk rekonstruálni, az például a tápláltságfoka, tehát az, hogy mennyire volt kövér vagy sovány az illető. Éppen ezért, ha nincsen róla adat, akkor közepes tápláltsági fokot rekonstruálunk. Szintén nem tudjuk, milyen volt az illető arckifejezése életében, tehát hogy általában vidám volt vagy szomorú, milyen volt az egyéni arckifejezése. Úgyhogy az arcrekonstrukció az nem portré, hanem szigorúan csak az anatómiát és a koponya formáinak a megjelenését jelenti az arcban.
How strong were his muscles? Where were the eyes set in his skull? How thick were the fleshy parts? Thousands of autopsies have provided averages for these measurements. Agnes Kushta painstakingly applies this knowledge to the task of reconstructing the head.
Ez nem egy hétköznapi viszony, hogyha az ember a kezében fog egy koponyát, és egy kicsit mindig megilletődöm, hogyha a kezemben foghatok mondjuk egy 1500 évvel ezelőtt élt ember koponyáját, és természetesen nagyon érdekel az is, hogy hogyan élt, hogy nézett ki, és egy külön adománynak érzem azt, hogy rekonstruálhatom az arcát, és azt is megláthatom, hogy milyen arca volt, tehát hogy nézett ki. Ez egy meglehetősen intim viszony, hiszen az ember általában belül hordja a koponyáját, és nem sok mindenkinek adatik meg az, hogy más valakinek a koponyáját a kezében tartsa.
After weeks of work, the head is given a face. This is what this particular German would have looked like when he was alive. The archetypal German is what would have been said at one time, when the population was divided into races with criminal intent. But this face is just one of many different faces. This man has the fine, aristocratic features one might expect to see on the face of a Roman senator. In the distant future, even these Germanic barbarians would belong to the Roman establishment. But the Cimbrians still had a long way to go. Just as in their homeland, starvation often threatened the Cimbrians on their journey. If necessary, they ate roots and beech nut gruel. But they were at home in the dark primeval forests, so feared by the Romans. Tacitus said they were skilled hunters.
When they aren't fighting, they spend their time hunting. They satisfy their hunger without elaborate preparations or any delicacy. They even eat meat raw, either fresh or frozen with the hide still on. They work the meat with their hands and feet to make it edible.
And Tacitus reported on another aspect of the early Germans.
They respect and listen to their women. They are their comrades, ready to bear and brave the same as them in times of trouble and danger, peace and war.
The life of the nomadic warrior became second nature to the Cimbrians and Teutons. Other tribes and clans joined them on the way and became Cimbrians too. That was the practice during the time of the great tribal migrations. Despite what nationalists and racists may now claim, the old Germans had absolutely no interest in the issues of blood and race, lineage and origin. The Germanic word folk means a group of warriors that followed. The further they traveled, the greater their numbers became. The Cimbrians had now been on the move for 4 years. 1,600 kilometers from home, they came to the Danube, to present-day Hungary and Romania. There, they came upon Thracians and the Celtic tribe of the Skordiski. The Cimbrians took a treasure back to Denmark from the Danube, the world-famous Gundestrup cauldron. This priceless silver bowl was found in a Danish bog by a farmer and weighs 10 kilograms. It's one of the most beautiful artifacts from the era of the barbaric invasions. Was it a sacrificial vessel? A holy grail? This phantasmagorical world, with its depiction of exotic animals unknown in the north, has puzzled archaeologists. Celtic warriors going into battle. Did the Cimbrians drink mead from the cauldron to celebrate their victories? Or did they even fill it with the blood of slain enemies? The cauldron is a Danish national monument. For a long time, it was proudly thought to have been made in Northern Europe. This is unfortunately not true, says archaeologist Flemming Kaul. The cauldron must have been taken back to Denmark by the Cimbrians as loot, or as a gift. But how can he prove it? Over the years, he has examined every detail with the sharp eye of a detective. It is true that it depicts warriors whose shields are like the ones found in Northern Europe. They are blowing the carnix, terrifying trumpets of war, and bear the symbols of Germanic gods on their helmets. And yet, Flemming Kaul believes that this elaborate artifact is not part of Cimbrian culture. One important clue is a goddess with a Thracian torque, which is like one found near the cauldron. Kaul believes the cauldron was a symbol of friendship between two tribes the Cimbrians came across.
Her havde man en fælles fjende, men man var to forskellige folk, der talte forskellige sprog. Man måtte have noget, der kunne forene folkene. Og det blev så Gunnestrup-kedlen, der blev skabt som en, skal vi sige, religiøs genstand, hvor de højeste kredse omkring ritualer med denne kedel, måske har man drukket vin fælles af den, har kunne føle sig forenet både i religiøs og social sammenhæng.
A man riding a dolphin. Exotic cheetahs. Bare-breasted Amazons. Hunting gods with antlers. After comparing the cauldron with other artifacts, Flemming Kaul has established that only Thracian silversmiths were capable of making such a piece. The Cimbrians must have encountered them on their travels. But where?
Gunnestrup-kedlen må jo så være lavet et sted, hvor disse to folk, om jeg så må sige, var til stede i nogenlunde samme område. Og så vidt det ser ud nu, så kan det kun være i det nordvestlige Bulgarien og i det sydvestlige Rumænien.
So the Cimbrians took the cauldron and the torque back to Denmark from this region. It's proof that they ventured as far as the Danube. The treasure was sunk in the bog near Boromosa as a sacrifice to the gods. Perhaps as thanks for good fortune in battle, or maybe with a prayer that the wandering tribe far away would find a better homeland. From the Danube, the Cimbrians continued their trek. But where to? How did they find their way? They had neither maps nor compass, and they didn't know how to take their bearings from the stars. The Cimbrians talked to scouts and traders. Where were there spoils to be had? Where would it be easy? Where might they run into enemies? Maybe even Roman legions. If they were unable to agree on their route or the destination, they consulted the oracle in the Germanic tradition. A stone and the fresh blood of a prisoner served as a signpost, or so tradition relates. Follow the setting sun. From Romania and Hungary, the Cimbrians and Teutons headed west in the direction of the Promised Land, Italy. They had now been wandering through Europe for 7 long years and had covered over 3,000 kilometers. In 113 BC, they appeared in the Lower Alps near Norea in Carinthia, dangerously close to the Roman Empire. Here was a good place to stay. The land was fertile, rich in iron and even gold. But the Romans felt threatened. Could the terrifying Cimbrians and Teutons even be planning a march on Rome? They promised the Roman consul Carbo they'd move on peacefully. Pretending to be helpful, he offered them guides, who lured the Cimbrians into an ambush. Carbo's legions thought that the naive barbarians would be easy prey, but it turned out quite differently.
With the speed and ferocity of a firestorm, they attacked, recklessly and fearlessly, with brutish voices and dreadful screams.
The first clash with the Germans at the Battle of Norea was a shock to the Romans. They were terrified of the savages from the north, who were unsurpassable in strength and giant-like in appearance. The Viennese anthropologist Dr. Maria Teschler-Nicola compares the skeleton of a German with that of a Roman. Was Diodorus's report of gigantic Germanic warriors a figment of Roman fantasies and fears? Anthropologists need only a bone from the thigh or upper arm to ascertain a person's height. With the help of statistical tables, they can establish the body height of different races to within 2 or 3 centimeters. Hundreds of examinations of skeletons have shown that many Germans were tall. On average, the Cimbrians were 1 meter 74, or about 5'8", and some considerably taller. So they frequently towered over the Romans by as much as a head.
Die in den antiken Schriften festgehaltenen Befunde, dass die Germanen deutlich größer von Gestalt gewesen sein sollen als die Römer, das ist also kein Phantasmus, sondern das entspricht offensichtlich der Realität.
The Romans never forgot their first battle against the Cimbrians and the Teutons in 113 BC. For a long time they continued to fear the furor Teutonicus.
In battle, they rejoiced, hoping to be able to depart this life in a glorious and joyful manner. But then Consul Carbo paid for his duplicity with heavy losses. Ingloriously, his legions were crushed. The Romans scattered and fled into the woods.
But the Romans were saved by, of all things, a barbarian god. The Germans were said to be fearless. Only thunder and lightning filled them with panic. They were terrified that their god Thor was about to bring the sky crashing down. Believing it was a sign from the gods, they ran from the defeated legionaries. Rome narrowly escaped a military catastrophe for the time being. Archaeologists have located this battle at Magdalensberg in Carinthia. Is this find also connected with the Cimbrians? 18 bronze helmets were found in a hiding place on the Cimbrians' route to the Alps. Each one was worth a fortune even in ancient times. Were they Cimbrian spoils of war? Helmet B, now kept in the Museum of Art History in Vienna, is known all over the world for its mysterious inscription, a fascinating case for the Germanist Hermann Reichert. From right to left, he has deciphered Hari, Gasti, Teiva. The language is clearly Germanic. Hari is Germanic for army, Gasti is guest, Teiva could mean to the divine.
Ja, die Inschrift ist germanisch, dann war der Auftraggeber sicher ein Germane. Falls der Helm, beziehungsweise falls die Inschrift auf dem Helm um 100 vor Christi entstanden ist, dann kommt da wohl am ehesten ein Kimber in Frage. Geritzt hat er die Inschrift sicherlich nicht selbst, denn der das geritzt hat, der war sehr geübt. Eine recht wahrscheinliche Möglichkeit ist die, dass er die Feinde den Göttern geweiht hat. Die Ritzung auf dem Helm soll bewirken, dass sich die Götter die Feinde als Opfer holen.
That was the Germanic custom, Hari Gasti Teiva, to the divine guest of the army. It is the oldest example of Germanic writing and the only trace of the Cimbrian migration outside Denmark yet found.
Through impassable, unknown terrain, they were driven on by human restlessness. During their long wanderings, they left many behind, exhausted and sick. Many died or fell in battle.
For over 8 years now, they had been on the move. In 112 BC, an immeasurable number of them tried to find their way over the Alps. It was an extremely open, multicultural society. Anyone who joined them and risked his life bravely in battle simply belonged. Anyone who was poor could become rich. Anyone who distinguished himself could even become a commander. After the historic victory at Norea, the Cimbrians and Teutons descended upon Gaul like an unstoppable storm cloud. In battle after battle, Roman legions tried to halt their campaign without success. For 10 years, the Cimbrians and the Teutons spread fear and dread throughout the Roman Empire. Only when the tribes went 2 different ways was the consul Marius able to crush the Teutons near Aix-en-Provence. The Cimbrians, however, crossed the Alps again. Their goal, the fertile plains of the Po Valley. They had traveled for over 7,000 kilometers across Europe without finding a homeland. They had been on the move for 19 long years. But even warriors eventually grow weary and want to settle down, to have a roof over their heads, plant crops and graze cattle, at last to bring an end to their wandering. Ever since leaving Jutland, they had been searching for the promised land. Finally, they came to the north of Italy. The Cimbrians were ready to serve the empire as soldiers. In payment, they asked the Senate for a homeland. But the Romans had not forgotten their defeat at Norea. Marius, the commander who had defeated the Teutons, had reformed the army. The fear of the barbarians had been overcome. Marius and his soldiers took well-planned revenge.
When the ravens flew to the place where the Cimbrians lay slaughtered, never had they feasted so well.
The Cimbrians had faced the Romans in open battle, but they were vanquished by superior force. Those who did not fall in battle fell on their own swords, or so the historian Florus tells us.
With bare bosoms, the women spurred on their men in battle. When they were defeated, first they strangled their children. Then, in despair, they plunged a knife into their own hearts, or hanged themselves from their carts with belts or ropes or their long plaits.
The Cimbrians refused to be led in chains through Rome in shame and dishonor. They refused to be mocked and spat upon, ending their days as slaves. Freedom or death. They were free and wanted to remain so. Marius was celebrated as the savior of Rome, but the tribe of the Cimbrians, who had left the north in search of a better life, were wiped out in 101 BC. After the fall of the Cimbrians and the Teutons, the Romans felt safe. They wanted to extend their empire in the north, right to the edge of the inhabited world. But other Germans, Arminius and his Cheruscans, were to confine the empire to within its borders.